So I feel like sometimes we fall for this trap in the watch world that you need to spend a lot of money for a watch to look expensive and premium, although that couldn't be farther from the truth. There are so many watches that punch above their weight class, not only in terms of just pure aesthetics, but also in terms of providing the stats and specifications that some of these higher end watches provide. And that is really the basis for the conversation that I want to have here in today's video, because today I want to present to you 7 watches that look way more expensive than they truly are. With this list of 7 watches, I really tried to balance out the stats and specifications offering great value for money, but also just an amazing look, a great aesthetic, one that does look really, really expensive and high end. So without further ado, let's jump right in here to the first watch. Okay, so first up here, I think this is a watch really not a lot of people talk about, and it's the Orient Star Contemporary. So the Orient Star Contemporary is a watch that comes from Orient's Star lineup, as you can obviously tell, and that is their quote-unquote luxury line, although this particular watch can be found at a very, very affordable price for what it offers at around $400 to $500. And I think you're going to be really impressed to find out what stats and specifications this watch has. Okay, so I'm just going to start by rattling off some stats and specifications to hopefully impress you with this Orient Star Contemporary. So this watch has a sapphire crystal, a see-through case back, a power reserve indicator, a date window, a solid end-link bracelet with a milled clasp, and 100 meters of water resistance. It's also important to mention this watch comes in at 38.5 millimeters, which I think is just a perfect sweet spot size. Anywhere in that 38 to 41 millimeter range I think is just perfect for a variety of wrists out there, so a nice versatile size as well. The fact that you can get all of this for under $500 to me is very incredible, and I think that automatically makes this watch one of the best value for money propositions just in terms of stats that you can get for the money. And if we take a step back from these specific specifications here, it's just a beautiful watch. I think it's a great daily piece. Again, a lot of great dial colors, and that power reserve indicator at the 12 o'clock I think really sets this watch apart, makes it different, makes it special, and I think that's what to me makes it look way more expensive than it really is. So I'm very impressed with the Orient Star Contemporary, a great piece to consider, and I think again one that no one really talks about. So starting with a watch that no one really talks about and moving on here to a watch that I'll be honest everyone talks about, I want to recommend the Seiko Presage Cocktail Time. So this is a bit of an obligatory mention here. The Seiko Cocktail Time has become a bit of a legend within the watch community, one of Seiko's better releases in my opinion over the past 10 to 15 years. And really the story of the Seiko Cocktail Time not only is the value for money, but it's the amazing dials that you find on all of these watches. Really any cocktail time, no matter what version you're looking at, and there are a bunch of different variants, the dial is really the star of the show. So I could sit here and talk about the various specifications about the Seiko Cocktail Time, the 4R36 or 4R35 movements you will find in these watches, the Rolex crystal, the various case sizes at 40 and 38.5 millimeters. But again, the star of the show here is the dial, and I think that's what really makes this watch look way more expensive than it truly is. It seems like the gold standard for dial quality in the watch world is Grand Seiko, and this to me gets you at least 75% of the way there for pennies on the dollar. And all you got to do is give a quick Google search to the Seiko Presage Cocktail Time, and you'll be impressed by pretty much every single dial and color option that you see. I can't even begin to tell you how many times I've seen this watch in the various iterations on people's wrists, coworkers and random folks, and I'm always impressed by the watch. I'm always impressed by the dial, and it always looks better than what you would expect to pay for it. And you can get Seiko Cocktail Times for really under $500 all day long. They've been out for quite some time, so they are more affordable these days, and yeah, it is just very, very impressive for the money. And again, maybe the stats of this watch are not super impressive. You're getting a pretty basic, albeit a rugged movement in the 4R35 or 36, a Rolex crystal, and again, some of these things are not super impressive, but again, that's not why you're buying this watch. You're buying it for the amazing dials and just how beautiful they look. Okay, next up here, I want to talk about another Seiko, so back to back here for Seiko, and I want to talk about the Seiko Essentials chronograph. Seiko has been criticized in recent years for not really offering the same value for money that they used to about 5 to 10 years ago. I'm talking about watches like the Seiko Sarb that just don't really exist anymore, but this Seiko Essentials chronograph really to me signals a changing of the guard and a new era for Seiko, providing some pretty good value for money. So to put it simply, what you get in this watch is a retro looking design with a reliable mecha quartz movement from Seiko that really has the vibe of a vintage Rolex Daytona, Omega Speedmaster, from a brand that, you know, of course actually does have some real heritage. This isn't an AliExpress knockoff. This is something that, you know, despite having a lot of similarities to those designs, at least has its own kind of unique flair to it. This watch comes in at 39 millimeters in case diameter. It is 45 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip, and it's about 13 millimeters thick. I think those are great dimensions. I think that sort of retro look kind of favors or works well with that reasonable size. It also has a really nice lacquer dial. I've actually seen this watch in the flesh, and it is stunning. It really pops in the light. It looks really good. It also has a boxed mineral crystal, which adds to that sort of a retro look. And I think it's just a great package. Again, maybe stats wise, it's not going to blow your mind. It's not going to really be, too special. Again, there's no sapphire crystal. The bracelet isn't the greatest in the world. It does have a quartz movement, but again, what do you expect for under $400? But to me, it really has just an outstanding look that you can't really get. And again, that's kind of what we're looking at here. We're looking at watches that look more expensive than they really are. And I think that overall look is a huge factor. And again, the stats maybe aren't going to overwhelm you, but they're pretty solid at the very least. I really hope this is a signal of things to come for Seiko and their ability to produce high quality watches with a great look at a reasonable price. Okay, so next up here, another watch I think is not really talked about very much, and that is the Furlan Mari Mecha Quartz chronograph. So for those potentially scratching their heads, Furlan Mari is a relatively new micro brand that started in 2021 and is based out of Switzerland. And they actually started with a bang because this particular Mecha Quartz chronograph won a GPHG award when it first came out. And for those unfamiliar, that is kind of like the Oscars of watchmaking. And just taking a look at this piece, there's no surprise why it was very quickly recognized as a beautiful, amazing piece that needed to be awarded because it is beautiful. I mean, honestly, if you were to ask me my favorite looking watch on this list, this could be it. It has this kind of vintage Patek Philippe chronograph vibe to it. It comes in a variety of colors, and it's just a unique look for the money. This watch comes in around $750, and I really don't think you can get this exact look or something very similar for the money. There's a lot of chronographs, as I already mentioned in this video, right? I mentioned a Seiko chronograph that is a similar Mecha Quartz caliber that looks really nice, but it doesn't have this particular look. This is very unique to me, and I think relatively rare in the watch industry. And very much like the Seiko before it, the story here really is the look, not really the stats and specifications. This does have a sapphire crystal with AR coating. It is beautifully finished, but that's not really why you're buying this watch. You're buying it because it is such a unique look, and one that I think replicates a lot of beautiful, legendary designs that came before it. And as a quick aside, Furlan Mari as a brand, I think offer a lot of watches that look way more expensive than they truly are, so I would highly recommend you check them out. Okay, next up here, the fifth watch that I think looks way more expensive than it really is. I have to mention the Baltic MR01. So of course, hailing from the French micro brand Baltic, the MR01, in my opinion, offers a look unlike any other watch you can get at this price point. You can get the MR01 at around $750, and I think it's probably the closest thing you can get under $1,000 to some of these extremely high-end watches from Breguet, from Patek Philippe, and others. It just looks so special, and it's very easy to tell just by looking at it. And because this watch is a darling of the watch community, you may already be familiar with the fact that this watch has a micro-rotor movement. It is of Chinese origin from Hangzhou, and that does make it potentially harder to service, but it also makes this watch extremely unique. And this actually has a open see-through case back, and it's really cool to just look at this particular movement inside of this watch. It is very rare to have a micro-rotor movement in a watch under $1,000, regardless of how reliable or easy to service it may be. And very much like the Furlan Mari before it, this Baltic does a great job of really embracing this sort of a retro-inspired look. It also has a boxed acrylic crystal, which really makes it pop, and it also has the Breguet numerals, the really cool sub-second dial. It's just unique, and truly I think one of the best looking watches you can buy in the more affordable or under $1,000 space. It's just so unique. And actually, Baltic is retiring this watch very soon, so I highly recommend you check it out and try to get one before it goes officially off of the Baltic website. I don't know exactly when that's going to be, but this is such a great watch. And, again, there may be some concerns in terms of reliability, but I can kind of overlook that a little bit because it just looks so dang good. Okay, next up here, another micro brand, this time from the brand Jack Mason, and I want to spotlight the Stratotimer GMT. And I think this Stratotimer GMT really is a great example of not only having that aesthetic look that looks expensive and really nice and has a beautiful design to it, but having the stats and specifications to really back it up as a really value-packed watch. So let's start with those stats and specifications. This watch is 40 millimeters in case diameter, 47 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip, and is 13 millimeters thick. So yet again, a watch that should fit great on any wrist out there. And inside of this watch is a Miyota caliber 9075, which is a proper traveler GMT movement. And to support that, you have a sapphire bidirectional rotating bezel, you have a sapphire crystal, sapphire caseback, and a very high quality bracelet to go along with it. That combination of specifications, especially that sapphire bezel, I think is very rare for a watch at this price point. And this watch does specifically come in around $1,200, which I think is very reasonable for what you're getting. And I think from a distance, a watch like the Strato Timer does give off the vibes of something like a Rolex GMT Master 2, but I love that it's kind of uniquely its own thing. It's got a different style case, a different style bracelet. It has some features that you're not going to even find on a Rolex GMT Master 2, like a sapphire case back, like a sapphire bezel. It's just uniquely its own thing, and I think the value you're getting here for the money you're spending is definitely exceptional, and I think it truly looks way more expensive than it really is. I think if you're someone in the market for a very high quality premium GMT, this is one you really have to consider. There's definitely a lot of really great options out there, but this to me really sets itself apart in a lot of really cool ways. So Jack Mason with the Strato Timer, definitely an awesome watch and one that looks way more expensive than it really is. Okay, last but not least here for watches that look way more expensive than they really are, I want to mention the Frederic Constant Carré Small Seconds. So what you see with this watch is kind of what you get. It of course very much looks like a Cartier tank with those Roman numeral style Arabics. It also has a beautiful small seconds at the 6 o'clock, and combine that with a 36 by 25 millimeter very beautifully polished case. And what you have is a really nice package, and it comes together to be a very beautiful interpretation of the tank design. One thing I love about this watch is sort of the onion shaped crown. Definitely a unique part of this watch that you don't really see on a lot of watches. And definitely the biggest flaw with this watch is going to be the movement. It has a quartz caliber, specifically the Frederic Constant 235 quartz caliber, which is accurate to 15 seconds a month and has a battery life of about 2 years. Those aren't particularly special sort of stats for a quartz movement, but definitely adequate and will of course keep time very well. So, definitely a little disappointing to have a beautiful watch like this not have maybe a proper, beautifully decorated mechanical movement inside of it. But this watch on the surface, I think still does look so good, and it really imitates watches like the Cartier tank so well for the money that I think it has to be considered for this list. Again, we're looking for watches that look more expensive than they really are, and I think this watch really does that well. You can get this watch for about $1,100, but you can certainly get it cheaper if you go gray market. And I just love the way this watch looks. I'm of course a huge fan of the Cartier tank, and to me this watch is kind of the Cartier tank but a bit curvier and a bit different. And if you're a big fan of that look but can't spend or don't want to spend the Cartier prices, this is something I would definitely look at as a possible option for you. So that is my list of 7 watches that look way more expensive than they truly are. After talking through this list, I will say a lot of these pieces have quartz movements inside of them. Hopefully you guys aren't too upset about that. I know there's a big grouping of people that won't really consider a watch if it has a quartz movement, but I think if you want a high quality watch that looks really good for a reasonable price, that is kind of one of the concessions you're going to have to make is going for a quartz movement, because I think that's where some of the cost savings exist. At the very least, I think this is a list of 7 watches that does look very, very good, and in my opinion look way more expensive than they truly are. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. What do you think of my list, and what watches would you name as being more expensive looking than they truly are? I'm very curious what you guys have to say, and I love hearing your suggestions. But that's pretty much it for this video. If you enjoyed, I would really appreciate it if you can give this video a like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks.